Well, if you thought that real-life news channels covering some Arma footage as if it's actually real footage, if you thought that was the thing, you'll be very interested to see what is going on here with Unrecord, right? Which has been absolutely making waves because it does look startlingly realistic. When you take a look at this, you basically, for a lot of people, it's a bit indistinguishable from reality. Now, there's actually a few ways where it's actually a little bit more simple than some people may think. It is remarkably impressive, but it does remind me of a similar situation that happened. I think it's with the game Ride. It's a motorcycle game, right? And it looked very photoreal. But one of the reasons why it looked so photoreal wasn't exactly what people thought. And this time around, you even see a similar thing. Okay, so this almost looked like an FMV situation until the developer showed it just running in Unreal, right? So obviously, it did go viral on social media. And absolutely, when you see shooting mechanics executed in such a visceral manner, in a way that is probably more visceral than like a really authentic looking VR game, like that, absolutely, it has the intended impact on people, which is what has made this go humongously viral. In this case specifically, actually, Blue Drake 42, who is a developer, pointed out that the original map here is actually from the Unreal Engine marketplace, but it's enhanced obviously by the body cam framing and additional work on lighting and textures. But we actually do now know a little bit more about the game itself, and I think the more that we found out, the more it actually does look like a potentially interesting situation. Right, Unrecord is a single-player FPS that tells the story of a tactical police officer from the perspective of his body camera. As you work to solve a complex case, you'll need to use your tactical and detective skills to succeed. And that's the thing. It is not just a shooter. It is obviously doing this whole body cam thing in order to very much put you in that situation. Now, that means it's going to feel very authentic to people. And that then means it's going to have a very real emotional reaction that does come from all of the times that people have seen things that look like this and are very distressing to view, right? That's what a lot of people will be thinking of. And it does get to that stage, I think, for many when they're like, okay, well, Call of Duty, it's Call of Duty, even when it's trying to be a bit more realistic looking, it doesn't feel this realistic. So for a lot of people, it just ends up hitting so close that for some people it's like, right, this could potentially be a very powerful way of telling that story. It could be. But then you kind of get to a 6 Days in Fallujah situation where, you can use those techniques well, but is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? I think I would contend that this level of authenticity puts a humongous multiplier on what you're doing. I think it means that any narrative triumphs that would be done, they'll be even more focused on, right? The, tension or tragedy of a specific scene because it feels so real, and that can make it gut-wrenching, and that can make it emotionally, powerful, right? Or you end up in a situation where any missteps, any cracks that form, those are then magnified tremendously to the point where a misstep or something not quite landing may altogether have a more, say, serious effect than the developer would intend. And ultimately, I think where I fall in this is quite similar to the director of Metal Hellsinger, which, by the way, is a fantastic game. I believe it's on Game Pass. He said, "Very cool, but deeply uncomfortable setting and vibe. Let me be very clear. There is a place for games that make you feel uncomfortable. Nowhere did I say this game should not exist. Will I want to play it? Don't know. Maybe. Depends what it is." And basically, yeah, I totally agree with that personally. As a shooter, maybe some of what people would want from like the very visceral nature of like a virtual reality game, maybe it'll achieve that. Maybe it'll be able to achieve some powerful narrative moments by making something that is usually reduced to being arcadey action actually feel very real. But we have actually learned more and more as time has went on, because there is some evidence that the developers are at least implying that they've got an interest in making this more than just SWAT 5. I actually do remember enjoying some of the SWAT games back in the day, but we do have some stuff for its influence here. Unrecord is a narrative game that takes place from... it takes inspiration from realistic FPS games. It could be described as a blend of Firewatch and Ready or Not. Now, bringing in Firewatch is very interesting, given that that is a narrative game. Realism is not an obsession, but rather an integral part of the universe, so Unrecord will not be a simulation game. Now, when you look at Ready or Not, that is, that is your, I suppose, more of your, your SWAT or police raid sort of thing. But whenever they then say Firewatch, that implies a level of introspection, right? The game, it's not called Record, it's called Unrecord. And there's obviously body cam footage that has went unrecorded in a way that has, obviously been pretty impactful. So I wonder if they are actually trying to take it to that higher narrative angle, which, if so, then I'll certainly commend the bravery. They'll absolutely have to thread the needle, but like what the Metal Hellsinger director said, like, there is a place for a media to do that. Absolutely. Now, there's a game feature in Steam that specifically calls out that it's building on the idea of playing with perspective and optical illusions, which is also quite interesting. So you are, playing as a police officer in a highly realistic fashion. But everything is thus far pointing towards it seeming like the game has got something to say about the situation that it's going to be putting you into. So from an artistic point of view, I think that is very valid, that there's a lot of things to say here, that it's an interesting topic to explore, and I don't think they should be preemptively, shut down, because some of this footage makes people feel uncomfortable. They could release this game, it could be great. They could release this game, it could, to a lot of people, be a big problem. Who knows? It hasn't released yet. We don't actually know what they're doing. Now, as for the developers' response to everything, well, there's been quite a few things. Number one, is this a scam or is this real footage? Ultimately, it is real footage, right? It's it's in Unreal. It's footage captured from an executable. It is real. Now, why does this look real? And this is where I wanted to bring up that motorcycle game, specifically because all of the internet was saying, "Oh wow, this looks so realistic." And the race in question was the Northwest 200, which is impactful to me because I live on the old course of the Northwest 200, and it happens right beside where I grew up. So I know that place. I've drive down the road that you play on in that game. And there's a few things that they do. Number one, it's overcast, making things feel super realistic and overcast. More possible. It's also raining. Rain is one of those effects we can do really well. But most importantly, the footage was captured in a replay mode. And that replay mode was simulating the way that, the head of the person on the motorcycle would be moving. The sort of thing that if you were just sitting there playing it with your controller, you maybe would get motion sick, right? A bit nauseous because the camera's all over the place. But when you look back, it's actually very realistic feeling to, I suppose, if you just put a GoPro inside a helmet. And in this situation, it's an overcast day. It is leaning on types of lighting that we can do very well. It's leaning on quite a few modern techniques with like texture and lighting that, in a situation like this, can look very, very authentic. But most importantly, the camera, right? It's the way that camera moves, the way that those animations are done. They're not being done to make it a super slick shooter. They are being done to make it feel authentic. And one of the things that, in video games, that makes a video game feel like a video game is because interactions that your brain are used to just don't happen. You move too smooth, right? Whereas normally when you walk around the place, you're not sitting there, perfectly stabilized. It feels normal to you because your brain's used to processing information like that. So when you're sitting down and you're playing a game on your PC and you have realistic head bob, it'll make you feel very nauseous and very weird because your brain's going to be very confused. But in a situation like this, that is how you trick the brain basically into thinking, oh my God, look how realistic this is. All right. So it's a big lesson in how to actually make game footage really look that real. Obviously, though, as time goes on, we have the likes of, Nanite, we have the, Lumen, all those new Unreal Engine features that are remarkably impressive and make things like this significantly more accessible. We are going to see it be more and more possible to pull off aesthetics like this, which, honestly, for a lot of people want to play, is fantastic. If you want that super realistic milsim, with the likes of this, you'll be able to get it. Now, of course, in this case, they're not aiming to make a simulation game. It is a blend of, your SWAT 5, your sort of SWAT game, but with Firewatch. And I think the bit that potentially elevates this is that aspect of Firewatch. Because I think that from a narrative design point of view, there is a hell of a lot of just interesting things that they can do. Now, another big thing that's cropped up is this pro-police or anti-police, which, in quite a few countries, recently with the United States, the United Kingdom, this is a major topic of discussion. It's something that people, have very much a reaction to. So they know the game will be sold in the whole world, not their native France. It is not commenting on any foreign policy or real-life events. So they say that they don't intend to feature discrimination, racism, violence against women and minorities, and that it's basically going to have no biased or Manichean take on criminal acts and police violence. So they're effectively suggesting that they intend to tell a story that doesn't necessarily say that there's only good, there's only bad, for cops and criminals, in some sort of very binary narrative. They say that they understand and respect that people will be disturbed by the game's content, which is a very natural response to somebody, interpreting their art. And this is obviously something that they are, that they're making it specifically like that so that it feels like that, right? And they basically just said that if they explain too much more of what they want to do at this stage, it'll end up being spoilers, and they just ask the audience to trust them in the way that any other crime narrative is trusted in other mediums. And I think that is the thing. There are plenty of, I think it was called Northern Lights or something, a new police show filmed in Northern Ireland. Line of Duty, I don't know about in the US, but Line of Duty was like a humongously successful series in the UK and Ireland, and that was specifically focusing on policing. And it's one of those things, I think if you try to do that in games, there's a chance Twitter may explode at you in a way where you maybe wouldn't have that same response if you were working in film and television. So that's an interesting thing. I've seen a lot of people retroactively look at Zootopia and be like, oh, Judy Hopps is in the police, this is terrible. Maybe people taking it to a very extreme, very binary point of view. As the director of Metal Hellsinger said, though, we just have to see. Like, will they set out to do something interesting, do it successfully, and have something interesting to say? You take a game like Hatred, which obviously Hatred, we all heard about that. There is a world where something that sort of looks like a Hatred maybe could have done something that was a little bit more, artistically relevant, that had something interesting to say. Obviously, Hatred was not that. It's just like how with this game, could be good, could be bad. As for release and timing, there's no release date. There's no planned release year. Now, that said, the response to this video has encouraged them to set up their Steam page so that they can get wish lists. That's very important. If you can go to a game publisher, honestly, they can go to any game publisher who is happy, who's willing to tackle that subject matter within their library. And their game, it's already got so much market proof. So no matter what, I think they're pretty much going to be fine. As for optimization, it's a next-gen Unreal Engine 5 title. Now, they are saying that it doesn't rely on textures or polygon count that are like absolutely absurd. Again, if you look at like a lot of the core of, say, the like Nanite in Unreal Engine, it's a bit like, pixel density in a phone, right? Like whether this thing would be 4K or 8K, It's like the density is so well dense that like your eye can't really tell, can't tell the difference. So it's one of the things with like Nanite and a lot of how Unreal's processing that stuff, where they basically cull stuff that you won't be able to discern anyway, which is part of why those have ended up being such cool pieces of technology. But given what it is, maybe not something for an older PC. As reporting, no VR plans or anything like that, and they have not decided on specific platforms or consoles. The game does work on keyboard, mouse, and controllers. So overall, what's your situation here? Look, this is a game to keep an eye out on. I think that if there are people who are citing Firewatch as a point of inspiration, and they're making a game that looks like this, then that could be a narrative experience I'd be very interested to play, right? Yeah, absolutely. I could totally be down for that. Just have to see if it's good or not. What will have happened, though, is this has proven that this is a concept that people want, that people are interested in. That is going to open doors for these developers. I don't know what the state of local funding is, but even if they were to apply for, a prototype development fund, R&D tax credits or something like that, I don't know what's available in France. Any of those things, like your application, would humongously be helped by the immense market proof that this already has. I mean, the Jack Frags video, that's like well over 2 million views in YouTube. It's got many, 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 many more million views, I'm sure, on the likes of Twitter and the short platforms. Whatever publisher is happy to deal with the subject matter, I mean, it's market validated. People know about it. So this will have opened up many doors. I hope that means then that these developers get the time and the resources that they need to actually do it right. Because if they do have lofty narrative ambitions, as I said earlier, the point here is that this could actually feel sort of disturbing. Now, it's the sort of thing, if this ended up being a, terrorists versus counter-terrorists like in Counter-Strike, and it's just, it's a fun shooter and it feels super real, and that's just like a part of how the game is, in the same way that loads of us, me included, really enjoy those, those military games where it actually feels real. And, it's not because we want to go around murdering people or, any of that absurd stuff that some people say. It's just because there's that level of authenticity and thrillingness. I think that with a view like this, if you are hiding behind a wall and there's a bunch of, incoming fire, you're going to feel absolutely, spooked. So this sort of mechanic in that sort of game, I think easier to pull off. In a situation, though, where, maybe you're dealing, you're dealing with innocence, you're dealing with actually, tough situations. That's when it can be harder. That's when the realism puts a humongous magnifying glass on, on their narrative design. I like games that are good. I like games that try to brush up against the edge, that try to push the medium forward, maybe try to do something a little bit controversial. So I wish them the best of luck. I hope it comes out well. And because if it does, they really could have something to say. We could have a very, very interesting narrative. Again, they dropped Firewatch. Firewatch is pretty damn sick. Of course, though, if it's a misfire, then there'll be a very large magnifying glass on that misfire. And I don't just mean that in terms of notoriety because people know of the game. I mean, if you are getting that level of authenticity and then you have a narrative misfire, it's going to hit people in the gut more. Interesting situation. I'd love to know what you think about this one. At the very least, hey, controversial pieces of art get us talking, and that's interesting. We'll just have to see where this one goes.